The golden facade of the MAGA movement's most polished organization isn't just cracking, it is exploding in a fireball of legal threats, alleged infidelity, and corporate cold-bloodedness that would make a Machiavellian prince blush, and at the very center of this swirling vortex of chaos stands Erika Kirk, a woman whose grieving widow persona is being systematically dismantled by insiders who claim she is the ultimate political opportunist, a honeypot in designer heels, who isn't just looking to lead Turning Point USA but is allegedly hunting for her next power play in the highest reaches of the American government. While the world watched her weep on national television, claiming she prayed for a third child with her late husband Charlie Kirk, the rumors were already festering in the dark corners of D.C. that her eyes were actually fixed on a much bigger prize. The Vice President of the United States, J.D. Vance, and the recent bombshell announcement of Usha Vance's pregnancy has reportedly sent Erika into a tailspin of vengeful fury because it effectively nuked her alleged soft launch plan to insert herself into the Vance family dynamic. This isn't just a story about a grieving wife. This is a story about a calculated move to the top where people are treated like disposable pawns, a reality made chillingly clear by the leaked audio of a loyal, high-performing TPUSA employee who worked 90-hour weeks only to be terminated in a cold, heartless meeting with absolutely zero explanation, proving that behind the Christian values and the God and country slogans lies a corporate machine that eats its own and spits them out the moment they are no longer useful to the narrative. And speaking of narratives, the legal war being waged by Tyler Boyer and the TPUSA elite against independent investigators like wolves in finance is backfiring in the most spectacular way possible, because when you send a cease and desist to a man who has nothing to lose and a mountain of evidence, you aren't silencing him. You're giving him a green light to go nuclear, and that is exactly what is happening as the wolves are now alleging that Boyer didn't just manage the books, but created a labyrinth of shell companies like America's Turning Point to funnel millions of dollars into illegal political activity while maintaining a shield of plausible deniability that would let him operate in the shadows. We are talking about $8.6 million in grants moving between entities that look suspiciously like a money laundering pipeline for ballot harvesting operations, all while the donors, the hardworking Americans who gave $25 thinking they were getting a hat, received nothing but a cheap rubber bracelet and a ghosted phone line. The irony is suffocating. An organization that claims to fight for the forgotten man is allegedly stealing from them to fund a lifestyle of private jets and political posturing, and the deeper you dig into Erika Kirk's past, the more the good Christian mask slips to reveal a Venice, California actress who once lived in Shanghai and joked about showcasing cleavage to get views, a far cry from the modest, traditional figure she portrays today. This is the Streisand effect in full motion, where every attempt to bury the truth only makes the microscope zoom in closer, revealing a web of connections to federal investigations and characters like Scott Bessent, whose signature on suspicious IRS clearance letters is being called into question by experts who note that the IRS simply doesn't send out "we aren't investigating you" notes as a courtesy, especially not on Treasury letterhead signed by the Secretary himself unless there is a massive political favor being called in from the very top. The escalating drama surrounding the Turning Point ecosystem and the personal lives of its leadership has transformed from hushed green room gossip into a full-scale digital conflagration, as Erika Kirk allegedly prepares to deploy a strategic arsenal of receipts, a curated collection of encrypted screenshots, geolocated flight records, and compromising intimate photographs, designed to incinerate the Vance marriage in a scorched earth campaign fueled by a classic "if I can't have him, no one can" pathology. This isn't merely a localized domestic dispute. The entire MAGA infrastructure is currently in a state of suspended animation, paralyzed by the anticipation of a foundational domino falling in what promises to be the most seismic political scandal of the modern era, weaving a narrative of betrayal that traverses the intimate confines of the bedroom, the ruthless strategy of the boardroom, and the high-stakes outcome of the ballot box. This collapse is the logical conclusion of a decade-long metamorphosis where Charlie Kirk's original vision of grassroots, traditional campus activism was effectively dismantled by Tyler Boyer's aggressive Turning Point action wing, a shift that many observers characterize not as a strategic pivot, but as a predatory hostile takeover of the movement's very soul. In this new regime, genuine ideological education has been discarded in favor of a high-octane, high-cost political machine that operates in the gray shadows of 501c3 legality, and the recent deployment of legal threats against former allies like Candace Owens serves as a glaring admission of desperation, a frantic attempt to keep the lid on a pressurized cooker that has already reached its breaking point. The metaphorical lid is no longer holding. The steam is scalding, and as the public begins to scrutinize the digital footprint of Erika Kirk's pre-political life, specifically the bizarre, resurfaced videos featuring tool boyfriends and a palpable mockery of the very religious and traditional values the Make Heaven Crowded tour purports to champion, the movement's base is undergoing a painful awakening. They are beginning to realize that the figureheads leading them toward a spiritual and national revival might have more skeletons in their closets than hats in their inventory, revealing an organization allegedly built on the systemic exploitation of idealistic young talent and the cynical manipulation of donor anxieties. Within the walls of the Golden Empire, the mantra of running it like a military op has allegedly translated into treating tireless 90-hour-a-week employees like expendable infantry in a war of ego, while the donor class is viewed as little more than a high-yield ATM to fund a lifestyle of private jets and luxury optics. All the while, the woman positioned at the apex of this hierarchy is allegedly playing a high-stakes, real-world game of The Bachelorette White House Edition, treating the vice presidency like a prize in a dating competition while the stability of the country hangs in the balance. The sheer psychological audacity required to issue cease and desist orders when your own organizational house is built on the shifting sands of alleged infidelity and financial shell games is a level of hubris that traditionally precedes a catastrophic fall. As the wolves, the disenchanted insiders and whistleblowers, continue to howl, leaking damning audio of frank characters firing loyalists with the chilling brevity of "it's time to go," the facade of a unified movement is dissolving into the reality of a cult of personality that has finally run out of personalities to hide behind. Even the announcement of Usha Vance's pregnancy, which should have been a moment of simple domestic joy, is being recontextualized by skeptics as a tactical counterstrike against a woman who allegedly believed she could manipulate her way into a second-lady position through proximity and honeypot tactics. It proves that in the brutal arena of actual power, those who try to light fires of manipulation often find themselves the first to be consumed by the flames. The shadows cast by the ongoing labyrinthine investigations into the complex web of $8.6 million financial transfers have grown from mere whispers of clerical oversight into a towering monolith of public scrutiny, casting a long and darkening pall over the organization's once gleaming reputation. This specific figure, $8.6 million, serves as a recurring haunting motif for investigators who are tirelessly attempting to trace the circuitous route these funds took, traversing a landscape of shell companies and offshore accounts that seem designed specifically to obfuscate their final destination. This financial mystery is inextricably linked to the cryptic, almost surgical timing of the Baker-Tilly audit, which appeared on the horizon like a storm cloud just as Charlie's life reached its tragic premature end. The proximity of these two events, a rigorous forensic accounting of the books and the sudden silencing of a key figure, has become the central, pulsing focal point for critics and legal experts alike, who now question the fundamental integrity of the entire operation with a fervor that borders on the existential. To many observers, this is no longer a simple matter of mismanagement. It is a systemic collapse of ethics. The stakes were raised exponentially when reports surfaced regarding the president's own handwriting being identified on allegedly suspicious letters, documents that purportedly authorize high-level maneuvers that bypass standard board oversight. This direct physical link to the executive office strips away the shield of plausible deniability, suggesting that the rot may not just be at the branches, but deep within the roots of the leadership tree. The narrative further descends into a modern-day Shakespearean tragedy with the emergence of a widow who is no longer content to remain in the periphery of grief. Her reported threats to release intimate receipts concerning the vice president have introduced a volatile, deeply personal element into what was once a sterile political discourse. These receipts, a term that carries immense weight in the digital age, imply a cache of communications, images, or documents that could compromise the moral standing of the administration's second-in-command, effectively shifting the public's attention from policy debates to a voyeuristic fascination with the collapse of powerful figures. This transition into the realm of high-stakes drama is played out in real time across social media feeds, where every algorithmic twitch brings a new revelation. The inclusion of the cleavage videos, a crude and desperate attempt at content engagement that backfired into a PR nightmare, serves as a jarring reminder of the descent into sensationalism. These videos, alongside the whispered, mysterious backstories involving Shanghai connections, suggest a global scale of intrigue that feels more like a spy thriller than a nonprofit's operational history. The Shanghai angle, in particular, hints at international entanglement and undisclosed interests that have left the base feeling betrayed, wondering where the line between national advocacy and personal enrichment was truly drawn. The human cost of this trajectory is perhaps most visible in the callous disposal of loyal workers. Individuals who dedicated years to the cause were reportedly discarded like spent fuel as the leadership pivoted toward survival mode. This churn and burn philosophy regarding human capital stands in stark contrast to the values of community and loyalty the organization once championed. Simultaneously, the America's Turning Point initiatives are increasingly viewed as elaborate shell games, grand spectacles designed to distract the donor base and the media from the hollowed-out core of the Treasury. These events, while high in production value, are seen by skeptics as frantic attempts to maintain the illusion of momentum while the internal structure crumbles under the weight of legal fees and internal paranoia. Every element of this saga, the cold mathematical reality of the $8.6 million, the haunting timing of the audit, the visceral nature of the intimate receipts, and the frantic shell games, points toward one undeniable, grim conclusion. The Kirk era is no longer a story of youthful inspiration or a blueprint for grassroots success. Instead, it is transitioning into a stark cautionary tale regarding the corrosive nature of the thirst for fame and the inevitable decay that occurs when the pursuit of the spotlight eclipses the pursuit of the principle. It is a slow-motion wreck occurring on a global stage, proving that even the most powerful movements can be undone by the very egos that built them. The institutional ramparts that once shielded the Turning Point apparatus are beginning to show jagged fissures as mainstream investigative powerhouses like CBS pivot their lenses toward the labyrinthine paper trail of Treasury letters and increasingly scrutinized IRS communications. What began as a series of whispered allegations in the darker corners of the Internet has metastasized into a full-scale forensic audit by the public consciousness, where the mounting legal fees required to stave off discovery are poised to exponentially dwarf the trickling stream of incoming grassroots donations. This fiscal inversion creates a terminal velocity for the organization. When the cost of defending the past exceeds the capital required to fund the future, the machinery of influence grinds to a halt. The rank-and-file supporters, the hard-working individuals who were promised nothing more than a simple 47 hat, a sense of community, and a seat at the table of a national renewal, now find themselves standing at the gates of an empire they helped build, clutching questions that no high-priced litigator can silence with a cease and desist order. They are realizing that the belonging they purchased was a commodity, traded on a market of manufactured outrage and strategic obfuscation. The endgame has moved beyond the horizon and is now firmly situated in the present tense. The metaphorical wolves of accountability are no longer merely howling at the perimeter or scratching at the reinforced doors of the inner sanctum. They have breached the perimeter, bypassed the gatekeepers, and taken their seats in the boardroom, armed not with rhetoric or partisan vitriol, but with a mountain of cold, empirical evidence and a total, chilling lack of fear for the legal threats historically leveled by figures like Tyler Boyer. The strategy of using the courtroom as a cudgel to suppress dissent has reached its point of diminishing returns, for the simple reality remains that you cannot sue the truth into non-existence, nor can you indefinitely suppress the collective epiphany of a movement that has realized it was being systematically lied to by the very vanguard claiming to lead them to a political and cultural promised land. The structural integrity of this leadership is being tested by a deafening, vacuum-like silence emanating from the Kirk camp regarding the most damning and granular allegations, allegations that touch upon the sanctity of personal conduct, the shadowy movement of millions through a complex web of shell companies, and the seemingly heartless, scorched earth firings of loyalists who dared to blink. This silence is not a tactical pause or a sophisticated PR gray rock strategy. It is the loudest signal of an impending and inevitable collapse, a kinetic energy building behind a dam that is already showing signs of structural failure. As the narrative of taking back America is supplanted by the reality of personal enrichment and internal decadence, the public is left with a front-row seat to a Shakespearean tragedy of ego and ambition. We are watching the thin, gilded plastic crown of an ambitious queen begin to shatter and splinter under the sheer atmospheric weight of her own crashing out, a public unraveling fueled by the realization that the platform was never a pedestal, but a precarious ledge. This collapse is multifaceted, involving a breakdown of trust that extends from the donor suites to the dusty fairgrounds of the rural base. When the financial architecture of a nonprofit begins to resemble the offshore maneuvers of a vulture capital firm, the IRS and Treasury inquiries become more than just bureaucratic hurdles. They become the harbingers of a total systemic reset. The supporters who sacrificed their modest earnings for a cause they believed was virtuous are now seeing the itemized receipts of a lifestyle they were never meant to glimpse. The luxury travel, the opaque consulting fees, and the strategic insulation of the elite tier from the very consequences they preached to the masses. The inner sanctum is no longer a place of strategic planning, but a bunker of damage control where the primary objective is no longer the mission, but the preservation of the individual at the expense of the collective. As the mountain of evidence continues to grow, documenting the flow of funds from patriotic pockets into the accounts of entities that exist only on paper, the legal threats that once silenced investigative journalists and internal whistleblowers lose their potency. The law of gravity in politics is unforgiving. The higher the climb on a ladder built of deception, the more catastrophic the eventual descent. The crashing out phase is characterized by a frantic, erratic lashing out at both enemies and allies, a desperate attempt to maintain a facade of control while the very floorboards of the institution are being pulled up for inspection. The public, once a captive audience to the polished speeches and high-production value rallies, is now witnessing the raw, unedited footage of a power structure in its death throes. The shattering of that plastic crown is not just the end of a career or a specific leadership tenure. It is the definitive proof that a movement built on a foundation of shell companies and personal infidelity cannot survive the harsh, disinfecting light of the truth. The wolves didn't just bring teeth, they brought the ledgers, and those ledgers tell a story that no lawyer, no matter how aggressive, can rewrite.